The coffee in my hands had gone from lukewarm to morgue slab cold. I didn't drink it. It was a prop, something to anchor my hands to while I watched the most surreal, stomach churning, high definition rerun of my life. Or, more accurately, my previous life. The conference room at Pinnacle Media was exactly as I remembered it: sterile, soulless, and smelling faintly of corporate desperation and expensive air freshener. On the far wall, a projection screen displayed a PowerPoint presentation that was so familiar it made my teeth ache. My PowerPoint presentation, my concept, my 3 years of work. And there, standing in front of it all, was my sister, Jade. She was clicking through the slides with a little remote, her voice a smooth, confident melody of lies. As you can see, our proprietary research indicates a significant untapped market in the historical true crime niche. We're calling it Echoes of Crime. I almost snorted into my cold coffee, her proprietary research. I remembered the late nights I'd spent hunched over library archives and digital newspaper clippings, my eyes burning while she was out networking at whatever cocktail bar was trending that week. The name was mine, the branding was mine, the entire goddamn concept was mine. "This is impressive, Jade," Harrison Webb, the CEO of Pinnacle, purred from his throne at the head of the mahogany table. "My former crush, my current number one enemy." He looked just as handsome and twice as predatory as I remembered, his designer suit fitting him like a second skin. "Tell us about the research. Is it original?" "Here it comes," the little nervous laugh. "Any second now." Jade's perfectly glossed lips parted. "Heh," she chuckled, a sound like grinding glass. "Of course, we have a dedicated team." Her dedicated team was me in my cramped studio apartment, fueled by instant ramen and a burning passion she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The sting of betrayal should have been sharp, a fresh wound. But it wasn't. It was a dull, familiar throb, like a phantom limb remembering an old injury. Because I'd lived this exact moment before. Every slide, every lie, every smug look from the executives who were about to sign away my future. The only difference was that last time, I was blissfully, tragically unaware. This time, my fingers weren't trembling from shock. They were trembling with the intoxicating, electrifying knowledge that I knew exactly what was coming next, and this time I was ready. One of the VPs, a man whose face looked permanently pinched from sniffing at things he deemed beneath him, gestured vaguely in my direction. "And your sister, Maya, Jade, you mentioned she has a similar hobby?" Jade's smile was a masterpiece of condescending pity. It was a look she had perfected over a lifetime of being the golden child while I was the quirky, artistic one, the weird one. "Oh, Maya's little podcast?" she said, her voice dripping with false affection. "It's sweet, really. A fun little project she does. I think she records in her closet with a $10 mic she bought off Amazon." A ripple of polite, dismissive chuckles went around the table. Harrison's was the loudest. It echoed in the sterile room, bouncing off the polished wood and glass. They were laughing. Laughing at my 3 years of blood, sweat, and tears. Laughing at the 50,000 loyal listeners I had cultivated, one episode at a time, from nothing. Laughing at the community I'd built, the stories I'd painstakingly unearthed. I tasted copper in my mouth, the sharp metallic tang of biting my tongue so hard I was surprised I didn't draw blood. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up on this ridiculously oversized table and list every single lie Jade was telling. I wanted to tell them how she'd borrowed my research notes, how she'd copied my content strategy verbatim, how she was a hollow, soulless thief wearing my ambition like a designer dress. But I didn't. I just sat there, my expression carefully schooled into one of mild confusion, of a deer caught in very expensive, very bright headlights. Because I remembered what happened last time. I remembered storming out of this meeting, heartbroken and screaming. I remembered the fight, the accusations, the complete and utter severing of ties. I remembered dying a few months later, alone, in a crumpled heap of metal on a rain-slicked highway, my mind a toxic cocktail of betrayal and despair. And then I remembered waking up. 6 months before this very meeting, gasping for air in my own bed, the morning sun streaming through my window like a second chance I never asked for but was damn well going to use. So instead of screaming, I observed, I let the rage cool and harden into something else, something cold, sharp, and useful. I became a scientist, and this boardroom was my petri dish. I studied each face, cataloging them for my revenge in progress. Harrison Webb, with his perfect hair and empty eyes, who would use my feelings for him to manipulate me. Check. The pinched face VP, who probably thought a podcast was a type of vegetable. Check. The other executives, nodding along like a row of expensive bobbleheads, their only real talent being the ability to smell money. Check. And Jade. Oh, Jade. I watched the way her perfectly manicured, blood-red nails tapped against her stolen notes. My notes. I saw the faint sheen of sweat on her upper lip, a tell I knew she had when she was lying through her teeth. I breathed in the air, a weird mix of Harrison's obnoxiously potent cologne and the rich, leathery scent of the chairs, and filed it away in my memory palace of damning evidence. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a monotonous, droning sound that cast harsh shadows on everyone's faces, making them look like a pack of well-dressed jackals circling a kill. Last time, I was the kill. I was the unsuspecting lamb led to the slaughter by my own sister. This time, I was the hunter. And I had 6 months of foreknowledge, a heart full of scar tissue, and a beautiful, meticulous, and gloriously petty plan already starting to brew. I let a small, genuine smile touch my lips. Let them laugh. The best punchlines are always the ones you don't see coming. Sunday dinner at the Chen family home was usually my sanctuary. The smell of Mom's pan-fried dumplings, the sound of Dad's terrible jokes, the familiar comfort of the house I grew up in. Tonight, it felt like a foreign country where I was the only one who didn't speak the language of bullshit. "We are just so proud of you, Jadey," Mom gushed, placing a mountain of dumplings on my sister's plate. "A big, important job at Pinnacle Media. Such a brilliant career breakthrough." Dad beamed from the head of the table. "That's my girl. Knew you always had it in you. A real go-getter." I watched Jade soak it all in, batting her eyelashes and accepting the praise with a sickeningly humble, "Oh, it was nothing, really." "Nothing but grand larceny, you mean?" The aroma of sesame oil and soy sauce, a scent that usually felt like a warm hug, turned my stomach. It was a slow, dawning horror, realizing that they weren't just ignorant of the theft. They were complicit in their own way. They had never once asked me about my podcast with this much enthusiasm. To them, my passion was a hobby. Jade's theft was a career. Later, Jade cornered me in the kitchen while I was loading the dishwasher, the clatter of plates a welcome distraction. "You're being weird tonight," she said, leaning against the counter and inspecting her nails. "Am I?" I replied, not looking at her. "Just tired." "Look," she sighed, as if granting me an enormous favor. "About the Pinnacle thing, you should be grateful. I'm giving your little hobby some real exposure. This is bigger than your closet studio, Maya. It's the big leagues." I finally turned to look at her, my hands submerged in hot, soapy water. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her statement was almost impressive. She wasn't just a thief. She was a thief who thought she was a philanthropist. "Right," I said, my voice flat. "The big leagues. I'm so lucky to have you looking out for me." Her smile was triumphant, convinced she'd won. "I knew you'd understand." I just smiled back, a tight, brittle thing that didn't reach my eyes. Oh, I understood perfectly. Tuesday meant coffee with Riley. It was a ritual we'd had since college, our one constant in the chaos of adulting. We were at our usual spot, a bustling cafe downtown with huge windows, perfect for people watching. Steam rose from my latte, creating a little cloud that blurred her face for a moment. It was a kindness the universe was affording me because, when it cleared, I could see the guilt etched into every line of her expression. "So, weird question," she started, fidgeting with a sugar packet, shredding it into a pile of white dust. "You know how you were talking about maybe pitching Echoes of Crime to a bigger network?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "I might have mentioned it." "Yeah, well," she wouldn't meet my eyes. The cafe buzzed around us, the hiss of the espresso machine and the murmur of a dozen conversations. But her next words cut through the noise with chilling clarity. "I might have mentioned it to Jade. I just thought she could help. You know, with her connections. I didn't think she would." She trailed off, finally looking up at me, her eyes wide and pleading. Last time, this was the moment my world tilted on its axis. The revelation that my best friend, my confidant, had been feeding information to my sister for months had shattered me. This time, it was just another data point. Her justification tumbled out in a panicked rush. Jade promised to get me an internship at Pinnacle Media, Maya, a real one, in the marketing department. I'm so sorry. You understand, right? It's such a good opportunity. You understand, right? The unofficial slogan of every backstabber who wants to be absolved of their sins without actually atoning for them. I understand, I said. And the scariest part was that I did. I understood her ambition, her weakness, and her complete inability to see beyond her own self-interest. I stirred my latte, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. Don't worry about it, Ree. It's fine. She visibly relaxed, a wave of relief washing over her. Oh, thank God. I was so worried you'd be mad. Never, I said, smiling that same brittle smile from Sunday dinner. I felt like I was collecting them, a whole bouquet of fake, painful smiles. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I knew all too well. Harrison Webb. Hey, Maya, heard you were at the meeting today. Want to grab drinks? I have some exciting news about your podcast. The bait. Last time, I'd been so pathetically giddy. Harrison Webb wanted to see me. This time, I saw the hook for what it was. I agreed to meet him at Sky, a rooftop bar so pretentious it had its own signature ice cube shape. The city lights glittered below us like a carpet of shattered diamonds, a million false promises twinkling in the dark. So, Harrison began, leaning in close, his voice a low thrum over the generic lounge music. Jade's presentation was fantastic, but she mentioned it was all inspired by you, your raw talent. He placed his hand on my wrist as he spoke. It wasn't a warm, friendly touch. It was a brand. Calculated, cold, and proprietary. He was marking his territory. We're bringing the concept in-house, he continued, his thumb stroking my pulse point. And we want you to be a part of it. We see real potential in you, Maya. The revelation hit me then, not with the force of a blow, but with the quiet, chilling certainty of a puzzle piece clicking into place. This wasn't just Jade's idea. Harrison had seen my numbers. He knew my podcast had a dedicated following. He wanted my audience, my content, but he wanted it polished, packaged, and controlled by Pinnacle. Jade was just the more marketable face, the more pliable puppet. He had orchestrated this entire setup, dangling the possibility of a relationship in front of me like a carrot, using my stupid, naive crush as leverage. I don't know what to say, I stammered, playing my part. Don't say anything yet, he whispered, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. Just think about it. I thought about it. I thought about how I was going to dismantle his entire world. The final nail in the coffin of my old life came on Monday morning. I was at my desk at my soul-crushing day job, a marketing firm where creativity went to die, when my boss, Sandra Price, called me into her office. Her office smelled of industrial-strength hand sanitizer and broken dreams. She was a woman who communicated exclusively in corporate jargon, a walking, talking LinkedIn post. Maya, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. As you know, we're going through a period of strategic restructuring to optimize our synergistic workflows. Oh God, here we go. Unfortunately, she continued, peering at me over her glasses, your position has been identified as redundant in our forward-facing operational model. Fired. She was firing me in the most bloodless, buzzword-laden way possible. In my past life, this had sent me into a spiral of panic. It was the final push that made me feel so worthless, so desperate, that I almost took the insulting deal Pinnacle eventually offered. But my new, all-knowing brain was working overtime. Sandra was friends with Jade on social media. They went to the same yoga studio. A quick, hypothetical search in my memory bank of the future confirmed it. Sandra had lunched with Jade last week. It wasn't a coincidence, it was a coordinated attack. Jade to steal my work. Riley to feed her information. Harrison to manipulate me with a phantom opportunity. And Sandra to cut my legs out from under me, to make sure I was desperate enough to crawl back to them on my hands and knees. The four people I trusted most, in their own unique ways, had conspired to systematically gut my life. I stood up, gathering my things. "Thank you for the opportunity, Sandra," I said, my voice eerily calm. She looked surprised by my lack of tears. "Of course, Maya, we wish you the best in your future endeavors." I walked out of that office not with a box of my personal belongings, but with a finalized list of targets. The game was officially on. The first shot was fired digitally. I came home from my last day of redundancy and opened my laptop. My routine was automatic. Check my podcast analytics, see the new download numbers, read the comments from my listeners. It was the one thing that kept me going. But tonight, something was wrong. My podcast dashboard was blank. A bright red banner screamed across the top of the screen. "Error. This content has been removed due to a copyright infringement claim." I clicked through to the other platforms. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all gone. Wiped clean, as if 3 years of my work had never existed. My stomach dropped, the familiar rage bubbling up, hot and acidic. I knew who was behind this even before I saw the official legal notice in my email. The screen's glow was the only light in my dark studio apartment. I scrolled down the page of dense legalese until I saw the name of the complainant, printed in stark black and white. Jade Chen, on behalf of Pinnacle Media. She hadn't just stolen the concept. She was trying to erase my history. She was claiming ownership of every episode, every interview, every single word I had ever recorded. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a fury so pure it was almost sublime. I leaned back in my chair and, to my own surprise, I smiled. A wide, toothy, slightly unhinged smile. Because I remembered this part. This was the move that was supposed to break me. And I knew exactly what came next. The first rule of my new life: never let them see you sweat. The second rule: use their arrogance against them. I picked up my phone and dialed Jade's number. I took a deep breath, picturing myself as a sad, pathetic little kitten. I thought about lost puppies and rainy days. When she answered, my voice was a perfect symphony of confused, wounded vulnerability. "Jade?" I whispered, letting a little crack seep into my tone. "My podcast. It's gone, all of it. There's some email about copyright. I don't understand what happened." I could practically hear her smug smile through the phone. "Oh, Maya, I was going to call you," she lied smoothly. "It's just legal stuff, very complicated. Since Pinnacle is acquiring the intellectual property, our legal team had to file some takedowns to consolidate the brand. It's standard procedure." "But you can't do that," I said, my voice trembling beautifully. "That's my work. My name is on it." Her triumphant laughter crackled through the phone line, sharp and ugly. "Don't be so dramatic. Think of it as a clean slate. We'll talk soon about your new role. It's going to be great." She hung up before I could reply. I stared at my phone for a long, silent moment. The mask of the sad little kitten dissolved. The predator smiled. She thought she was consolidating a brand. In reality, she had just handed me the moral high ground on a silver platter, gift-wrapped for my entire audience to see. I immediately started executing my real plan. My most influential listener was a man named David Kim. In my previous life, I'd only discovered his identity after my death, when my meager online eulogies were flooded with comments from a verified tech mogul who had apparently been a huge fan. He'd posted about how my work inspired a new project of his. It was a tragic, posthumous compliment. This time, it was my ace in the hole. I found his business email, a closely guarded secret I'd only learned from that posthumous discovery, and sent a short, cryptic message. "They didn't just steal the echoes. They're trying to silence the source. I have a plan to make it louder. Maya Chen." He replied in under an hour. We agreed to meet at a quiet, high-end sushi restaurant in a part of town I couldn't have afforded to breathe in last week. The place was all dark wood and minimalist design, the kind of place where deals were made over meticulously sliced bluefin tuna. David Kim was younger than I expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through my carefully constructed facade. "I've been following your work for months," he said after we ordered. "You have a rare talent for narrative. When your feed went dark today, I assumed something like this was happening." The sharp burn of wasabi on my tongue focused my determination. They stole it all, I said simply. My sister and Pinnacle Media. I know, he said. I make it my business to know about intellectual property theft in the digital space. It's a pet peeve. He pushed a small plate of Toro toward me. So, what's your plan to make things louder? This was it, the moment of truth. I don't want to fight them for the old content. Let them have the ashes. I want to build something new, something they can't touch. An exclusive, creator-owned podcast network, high production value, A-list guests, and a platform that values and protects its artists. But I need backing, significant backing. David Kim didn't even blink. He picked up a piece of sushi with his chopsticks, dipped it in soy sauce, and ate it in one bite. He chewed thoughtfully for a moment. I'm not just a fan, Maya, he said. I'm an investor. I've been looking for a venture to disrupt the audio space. It seems that venture just found me. He extended his hand across the table. Let's build an empire, but for now we keep it completely silent. Let them think you're beaten. I shook his hand, the deal sealed over raw fish and a shared hatred for content thieves. Jade's version of Echoes of Crime, now a Pinnacle Media original, launched a week later with a massive marketing blitz. Billboards, social media ads, press releases. It was everywhere, and it was a spectacular failure. Jade was a good presenter, but she wasn't a storyteller. Her delivery was wooden. Her voice lacked the passion and intimacy that my listeners had connected with. The scripts, cobbled together from my stolen notes without the soul I'd poured into them, felt hollow. I watched with serene satisfaction from my apartment, a cup of calming jasmine tea in my hand, as the online world turned on her. My former listeners were not fooled. They were furious. The comment sections were a bloodbath. This is a soulless corporate ripoff of Maya Chen's podcast. Where is Maya? What did you do to her? #Justice for Maya. The original had heart. This just has an ad budget. Unsubscribed. The hashtag #Justice for Maya started trending. The reviews tanked. The listenership numbers, after an initial spike from the marketing, fell off a cliff. My phone rang. It was Harrison Webb. The cool, confident purr was gone from his voice. It was replaced by a tight, strained panic. Maya, he said, his voice clipped. The launch isn't going as expected. The feedback, it's not great. We need to talk about the Jade situation. Oh, I said, taking a delicate sip of my tea. Is there a problem? The emergency family dinner was not optional. Mom called me, her voice trembling, and basically ordered me to come over. The air in the house was thick with failure. Jade was a wreck. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She hadn't touched her dumplings. They hate me, she whispered, staring at her phone. The comments, they're brutal. My parents, who a few weeks ago were toasting their brilliant daughter, now looked at me with new, desperate eyes. For the first time, they seemed to be seeing me not as the quirky hobbyist, but as the one who actually had the talent. Maya, Dad started, his voice heavy. Maybe you could help her. Give her some pointers. You were always so good at that podcast thing. I just looked at him, my expression a perfect blank canvas for them to project their hopes onto. I said nothing. My phone buzzed on the table, a frantic series of texts from Riley. Riley, OMG Maya, this is a disaster. Riley, Pinnacle is freaking out. My internship is on the line. Riley, you have to help fix this. Please. You know how to talk to your listeners. I read the text, took a slow, deliberate bite of a dumpling. It tasted like victory, and put my phone back down, screen facing the table. I responded to each of their desperate pleas with the most powerful weapon I had, calculated, deafening silence. I just sat there watching them scramble, the first cracks in their perfect, stolen world beginning to show, and it was beautiful. Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Or at least, they tried. After a week of blissful radio silence, I received an email that made my blood run cold, then hot, then ice over. It was from a small, independent media house I'd interviewed with, a place I was genuinely excited about. They had verbally offered me a producer position. The email was a formal, soul-crushing retraction. Dear Maya, after further consideration and checking references, we regret to inform you that we will not be moving forward with your candidacy. Checking references. There was only one person they could have called who would have torpedoed my chances so effectively. Sandra, my former boss. I could practically hear her smug corporate speak assassination over the phone. While Maya meets expectations, she's not aligned with our forward-facing synergistic goals, lacks a certain team player mentality. It was a classic, untraceable character assassination. I stared at the email, the morning sunlight streaming through my window and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. This was their next move. Coordinated. After the public failure of the podcast, Jade must have called in another favor. Block my professional life. Make me unemployable. Make Pinnacle my only option. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. There were no tears. No panic. The woman staring back at me had learned to weaponize patience. They thought they were backing me into a corner. They had no idea I was building a fortress. Time for Act 2 of the Maya Chen Pathetic Loser Tour. I picked up my phone and called Harrison. I let my voice crack. I threw in a few well-timed, shaky breaths. I was Meryl Streep, and this was my Oscar-winning performance. Harrison, I whimpered. I got the offer rescinded. The other job, they said it was because of my references from my old boss. That's tough, Maya, he said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. He knew. Of course he knew. I don't know what to do, I cried, letting a fake tear roll down my cheek. I have nothing. Jade has my podcast. I don't have a job. Why don't we meet? He said smoothly. Same place, my treat. We met at the same rooftop bar. It was becoming our spot, the designated stage for our toxic little play. I made sure I looked appropriately downtrodden. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, an old sweater. I let the city lights blur through my fake tears as I told him my sob story. I'm desperate, Harrison, I whispered, looking up at him with what I hoped were big, pleading eyes. I'll do anything. Any opportunity at Pinnacle, I just need a chance. The look on his face was pure predatory satisfaction. He thought he had finally broken me. He leaned in, his cologne in suffocating cloud of arrogance. All right, Maya, he said, patting my hand condescendingly. I think I can pull some strings. It won't be glamorous, an unpaid internship. You'll be assisting Jade's team, helping with research and social media, but it's a foot in the door. An unpaid intern. Under my sister. On the project she stole from me. It was the ultimate humiliation. Thank you, I breathed, as if he'd just handed me a lifeline instead of a lead weight. Thank you so much. He smiled, triumphant. Welcome to the team. My unpaid internship at Pinnacle was a joke. They gave me a desk in a windowless corner and had me doing menial tasks. Fetching coffee, transcribing Jade's terrible interviews, managing the torrent of negative comments on their social media pages. It was perfect. They thought I was a beaten dog, licking my wounds in their kennel. They never bothered to watch me too closely. Every day at lunch and every evening after I left their gleaming corporate tower, I was building my empire. My equipment rental meetings were actually recording sessions with David Kim's team. He had secured a state-of-the-art recording studio in an unmarked building downtown. The kind of place with soundproofing so total, the silence was a physical presence. Inside that booth, my focus was absolute. I wasn't just re-recording old ideas. I was creating something bigger, better, and bolder. I used the insider knowledge I gleaned from Pinnacle's marketing meetings to my advantage. They were targeting has-been celebrities and C-list reality stars. I went bigger. Using David's connections and the credibility of my old podcast, I started reaching out to the people Pinnacle could only dream of. A Pulitzer-winning journalist who had gone silent. A world-famous chef with a secret to tell. A reclusive author who hadn't given an interview in a decade. One by one, they agreed to come on my new secret show. They were drawn in by the promise of authentic, long-form conversation, away from the corporate machine. They were drawn in by the promise of a network that was owned by a creator, not a board of directors. While Pinnacle was trying to resurrect a corpse, I was building a living, breathing, revolutionary new platform. The launch day was a Tuesday. I chose it specifically because Tuesdays were Pinnacle's big analytics meeting day. I sat in my sad little intern corner, dutifully fetching lattes for everyone. At exactly 10 a.m., I took out my phone and hit publish. It wasn't a launch, it was a carpet bomb. My new network, Nexus Audio, went live simultaneously on 15 platforms. Not just the big ones, but niche, international, and emerging ones David's team had partnered with. The centerpiece was the first episode of my new show, The Source, featuring an explosive, exclusive interview with the Pulitzer-winning journalist, breaking a national story wide open. I didn't need to watch my own download numbers. I could see the fallout in real time. First, a junior analyst's phone buzzed, then another. An editor swore under his breath. Soon, every phone in the glass-walled conference room was vibrating, lighting up with notifications. Jade's face went from smug to confused to sheet white in the span of 90 seconds. Harrison stormed out of the meeting, barking into his phone. I took a sip of my own coffee, which I'd had the foresight to buy from my favorite cafe on the way in, and watched the chaos unfold. The aroma of fresh croissants from the bag on my desk mingled with the sweet, sweet scent of their dawning horror. Industry blogs were exploding. Variety and The Hollywood Reporter had already published articles praising the audacious launch and the innovative new model of Nexus Audio. Jade's phone started ringing, a frantic, incessant buzz from panicked Pinnacle executives. She stared at it, then at me across the room. Her eyes were wide with a horrifying, beautiful understanding. She finally knew. The fallout was even more glorious than I could have imagined. Sandra, my old boss, apparently lost her mind. She stormed into my apartment that evening, her face a blotchy mask of fury. "Corporate espionage," she shrieked, waving her phone at me. "You used company time, company resources. I'll have you sued into oblivion." I had been expecting her. I calmly poured her a cup of jasmine tea, the same kind I'd been drinking when their world started to crumble. "Sandra," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I was an unpaid intern. I signed no non-compete. I used my own lunch breaks and my own equipment. Your threats are as empty as your corporate mission statement." I handed her the teacup. Her hands were shaking too much to take it. She stared at me, sputtering, realizing I was right. There was nothing she could do. Minutes after she stormed out, Riley arrived. She didn't even knock, just burst through the door, tears streaming down her face. She had clearly been fired from the internship that had never really started. "How could you?" she sobbed. "You let me think. You made me believe you planned this all along." "Yes," I said. There was no point in lying anymore. "I did." The look on her face, a mixture of shock, betrayal, and a strange, dawning respect, was something I would treasure for a very long time. After they both left, my apartment was quiet. The silence wasn't empty. It wasn't lonely. It was the sound of victory. It was the sound of my enemies self-destructing. It was the sound of a plan coming together perfectly. Just when I thought the universe had run out of plot twists, my phone rang with a number from an unknown area code. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another panicked call from someone at Pinnacle, but something made me answer. "Is this Miss Maya Chen?" a dry, formal voice asked. "Speaking." "My name is Arthur Covington. I am the executor of the estate of the late Eleanor Chen, your grandmother." My heart did a weird little flip. Grandma Eleanor had passed away over a year ago. She was a formidable woman, sharp and quiet, who had always seemed to see more than she let on. We'd been close, in our own reserved way. I'd thought her modest estate had been settled months ago. "There's the matter of a secondary inheritance that I need to discuss with you in person," Mr. Covington continued. "It was conditional." The next day, I found myself in a law office that smelled of old leather, aging paper, and secrets. Mr. Covington, a man who looked like he'd been born in a three-piece suit, slid a thick portfolio across a polished mahogany desk. "Your grandmother was a very shrewd woman, Miss Chen," he said. "She left you the bulk of her estate, but with a number of conditions that have only recently been met." I opened the portfolio. It wasn't full of stock certificates for blue-chip companies or deeds to quaint cottages. It was a list of holding companies and majority share declarations. I read the names, my brain struggling to process the information. 5 major broadcasting companies, regional radio networks, a television station, a massive digital media conglomerate, My grandmother, the quiet woman who grew prize-winning roses and made lemon cake, had secretly built a media empire, and I had just inherited controlling interest in all of it. At the bottom of the pile was a handwritten letter on her elegant, cream-colored stationery. My dear Maya, it read, talent is a seed, adversity is the soil. I could have given you a garden, but I needed to see if you could bloom in the desert. You have. I am so proud. Now, go build your forest. The revelation was a physical shock. My grandmother hadn't just been watching my little podcast. She had been testing me. This whole nightmare, the betrayal, the struggle, had been her final, elaborate, posthumous test of my worthiness. That evening, I met David Kim for dinner, not at a sushi bar, but in a private dining room with crystal glasses that caught the candlelight and a sommelier who spoke in hushed, reverent tones. I told him about the inheritance. He didn't look surprised, he simply smiled. I was wondering when Covington would call you, he said, taking a sip of wine. I stared at him. You knew? Maya, he said gently, I'm not just a tech mogul who happens to like podcasts. Eleanor Chen was my mentor. She gave me my first round of seed funding 30 years ago. We were business partners for decades. The room seemed to tilt slightly. So, when I emailed you, she instructed me to watch over you, he explained. The inheritance was always yours, but it was conditional. You had to prove you could succeed on your own terms without the safety net of her name or her money. You had to face betrayal and build something from the ashes. If you had failed, or given up, or taken the easy way out, the inheritance would have gone to charity. Every piece fell into place with a resounding, deafening crash. The betrayals weren't random acts of cruelty. They were a crucible, designed by my grandmother and observed by her partner to forge me into someone strong enough to handle what was coming. So the sabotage, the theft, it was all a test? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It was necessary, David said, and you passed spectacularly. A week later, I wasn't in a stuffy law office. I was in a glass-walled boardroom on the 80th floor of a skyscraper, overlooking the city where I had once felt so powerless. My company, Nexus Audio, was formally merging with the Chen Media Group, backed by David Kim's venture capital firm. The contract signing was a media event. Cameras flashed, their light bouncing off the skyline. Fountain pens, heavy and expensive, scratched across papers worth hundreds of millions of dollars, creating the world's largest independent podcast and audio network. The room was filled with industry titans. Executives from Spotify, Apple, and every other major player were there. People who wouldn't have returned my email a month ago were now lining up to shake my hand, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and naked ambition. They didn't just want to partner with me, they wanted a piece of the future I was building. I was no longer knocking on the door. I owned the building. Later that day, I stood alone in my new corner office. It was bigger than my entire old apartment. The city sprawled out below me, a map of my new reality. A kingdom awaiting orders. David walked in, holding 2 champagne flutes. He handed one to me. A recent market analysis, he said with a wry smile. With the combined assets of Chen Media and the launch of Nexus, our new entity now controls more direct-to-listener audio influence than Pinnacle Media and its top 3 competitors combined. I looked at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. It was me, but it wasn't. The woman looking back wasn't the girl with the $10 mic in a closet. She wasn't the unpaid intern fetching coffee. She was a queen surveying her domain. The irony was so thick and sweet I could taste it. The family who had dismissed my hobby was now living in a world where my hobby had become the dominant force. My success had created a shadow so large they would all have to work within it. I had truly been reborn. The news of the merger and my ascendance sent shockwaves through the industry. The first casualty was Pinnacle Media. Their stock plummeted in pre-market trading. Their innovative podcast was now a laughingstock, an embarrassing footnote in the story of my meteoric rise. Harrison, Jade, Sandra, and Riley all received notifications that same afternoon. I didn't send them. I didn't have to. The new board, installed by David and me, did a clean sweep. Termination notices effective immediately. Clause enforced industry blacklisting for breach of ethics and intellectual property theft. I didn't need the satisfaction of firing them personally. I was beyond that. I was busy planning my next 3 global acquisitions. I found out about it when I saw a news alert on my phone while unpacking boxes in my new penthouse apartment. The air smelled of fresh paint, new beginnings, and the clean, infinite possibility of an ocean breeze. I was home. And from this high up, I couldn't hear their notifications at all. My doorman announced her arrival with a professional neutrality that suggested he'd seen it all. Jade stood in my marble foyer, looking small and lost against the vast, minimalist space. The designer clothes hung on her differently now, like a costume for a part she'd forgotten how to play. Her tears, for the first time I could remember, seemed genuine. The cavernous entryway echoed with her broken apologies and desperate justifications. I was just, I saw you had this talent, this thing that was all yours, and I wanted a piece of it. She sobbed, her words tumbling over each other. I led her to the living room and poured her a cup of tea. It was from a set of my grandmother's antique china, thin and delicate and priceless. The ritual felt ceremonial, a final act before the curtain fell. I was jealous, Maya, she finally confessed, staring into the teacup as if it held all the answers. You were always the talented one, the one with the passion, and I couldn't stand it. I was so afraid of being second best. I listened, my expression calm. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a distant anthropological understanding of her motivations. She was a black hole of insecurity, and she had tried to pull my light into her void. I'm sorry, she whispered, looking up at me, her eyes pleading. Can you ever forgive me? My parents visited the next day. They sat awkwardly on my white leather sofa, dwarfed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline like a work of art. They had never been to my old apartment. They finally understood. Not the mechanics of podcasting or the intricacies of the deal, but the sheer scale of what I had built while they were busy praising the daughter who had stolen from me. Dad, a man who rarely showed emotion, cleared his throat, his voice thick and broken. We failed you, Maya, he said, his gaze fixed on the sprawling city below. We were so focused on the traditional path, on what looked like success, that we should have believed in your dreams. Mom reached across the coffee table and clutched my hands. Hers were trembling. We are so, so sorry, darling, she wept, her tears smelling of regret and the faint, familiar scent of the hand lotion she always used. Please, can we start over? Can you forgive your foolish old parents? Their pain was real, their remorse was palpable, but it was also 10 years too late. Harrison Webb didn't come to apologize. He came to grovel, but he disguised it as a business proposition. He arrived at my office, my real office, the one with the view, wearing an expensive suit that looked a size too big for his diminished confidence. The power dynamic was so completely, deliciously reversed. I sat behind my massive desk while he perched on the edge of a visitor's chair. Maya, he began, his voice trying for its old, smooth cadence and failing. What you've built is extraordinary. Truly, Pinnacle is struggling, I won't lie. But I see a path forward, a merger, a strategic partnership. We could combine our resources, your vision, and my infrastructure. He was offering me the scraps of his crumbling empire, hoping I'd be flattered. He was trying to frame his desperation as an opportunity for me. His usual cologne couldn't mask the faint, acrid scent of panic. He watched my face, looking for a sign, a flicker of the old, naive girl who used to crush on him. He didn't find her. He was talking to a stranger. And as he spoke, he finally began to realize that I held all the cards, and I had no intention of letting him back in the game. Riley's attempt was the most personal, a handwritten letter delivered by courier to my penthouse. It was on the thick, cream-colored stationery she always used, the kind we'd picked out together in a little shop after our college graduation. I read it that evening on my private terrace, a glass of expensive red wine in my hand, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. The letter was a chronicle of our friendship, from our first day as roommates to the coffee shop where she sold me out. It was filled with shared memories, inside jokes, and a desperate, heartfelt plea for another chance. I know I broke something precious, she wrote on the final page, but I hope you remember the girl I was before I got scared and stupid. I miss my best friend. I hope she's still in there somewhere. I folded the letter carefully, the crisp paper cool against my fingers. I thought about the easy laughter we used to share, the late night talks, the feeling of having a person who just got you. A part of me mourned that loss deeply, but my decision had already crystallized, clear and hard as winter frost. I invited all four of them to a private dinner, not at my home or my office, but at a neutral, obscenely expensive restaurant with a private room. The air in the room smelled of high-end wine, artisanal bread, and a tense, unspoken finality. They sat around the table, a collection of ghosts from my past life. They each made their case again, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of desperation. Jade pleaded for family. My parents pleaded for forgiveness. Harrison pleaded for a business lifeline. Riley quietly pleaded for friendship. I let them all speak without interruption. I listened patiently, my hands resting in my lap. When they were all finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. They all looked at me, their faces a mixture of hope and fear. This was it, the final judgment. I looked at each of them in turn, Jade, Mom and Dad, Harrison, Riley. Then I gave my answer. It wasn't angry, it wasn't vengeful, it wasn't emotional at all. It was simple, final, and delivered with the perfect, unshakable calm of someone who had already moved on. No. The deck of the yacht was cool beneath my bare feet. I stood at the railing, a mug of hot coffee warming my hands, and watched dawn spill across the Pacific Ocean like a watercolor painting. The sky bled from inky violet to soft pink to brilliant gold, the sun cresting the horizon in a silent, breathtaking explosion. The air tasted of salt and freedom. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, a relentless stream of notifications. Congratulations from global media leaders, partnership offers, market updates. I glanced at it, then set it back down, screen side down. That world could wait. The horizon stretched out before me, vast and unbroken. It was a clean slate, a promise of 1,000 new adventures, documentaries to film, stories to tell, worlds to explore, that I was finally completely free to pursue. There were no ghosts here, just the endless blue of the sea and the sky. Back in the city, the penthouse buzzed with a different kind of energy. I was hosting a dinner party, but the guest list was new. David Kim was there, deep in conversation with a brilliant documentarian I admired. The reclusive author I'd interviewed was laughing with my new head of production. Innovators, artists, thinkers, my new tribe. Laughter and intelligent conversation flowed through the rooms, which I'd filled with jasmine plants, their sweet fragrance a constant reminder of new growth. I stood back for a moment, just observing. These people valued me for my mind, for my vision, not for my family connections or what I could do for them. They were partners, collaborators, friends. The city lights twinkled below, the same lights that once seemed like false promises from a rooftop bar. Now they just looked like a beautiful backdrop to a life I had built myself, on my own terms. I decided to record one last episode of The Source myself. I sat in the sound booth of the studio I had built from a dream, a place that was now the nerve center of a global network. The silence was perfect, the acoustics capturing every nuance of my voice. The microphone, a top-of-the-line Neumann, felt comfortable and familiar in my hand. It was a long way from the $10 mic in my closet. The levels danced across the digital displays, a beautiful green wave of technology serving art. I didn't tell a story of crime or betrayal. I told my own. I thanked my listeners, the millions of them, all over the world, for their support. I thanked them for seeking justice for me when I couldn't. And then I announced my next chapter. I was handing over the host chair of The Source to the Pulitzer-winning journalist I'd first interviewed. I was stepping back from the daily operations, promoting my trusted second-in-command to CEO. I was going to focus on what I loved, finding and telling incredible stories. I was starting a documentary film division. 3 months later, I was halfway up a mountain in New Zealand. A heavy pack was strapped to my back, containing only the essentials: a tent, a sleeping bag, water, and food. The air was clean and sharp, scented with pine and damp earth, and it felt like it was cleansing my very spirit. I climbed alongside other hikers, strangers from all over the world. They saw a woman with a determined look in her eye, hidden behind sunglasses and a layer of trail dust. They didn't see the media mogul, the CEO, the woman on the cover of Forbes. They just saw Maya. It was exhilarating. That night, I camped under a blanket of stars so bright and dense, they looked like spilled sugar on black velvet. They shone with the same fierce, burning intensity as my own reclaimed dreams. I had never felt so small or so infinite. On my way back to civilization, I found myself with a few hours to kill in a familiar city. On a whim, I walked to the cafe where Riley had delivered her weak-kneed confession. It was under new ownership, the decor changed, but the big windows were the same. I sat down and ordered the same latte. This time, the steam that rose from the cup didn't carry the scent of betrayal. It smelled of roasted coffee beans, sweet milk, and victory. At the next table, a young woman was struggling with a mess of audio equipment, a portable recorder, a cheap-looking microphone, a laptop covered in stickers. She was chewing on her lip, her brow furrowed in concentration, but her eyes shone with that unmistakable fire of someone chasing a dream. I watched her for a moment, a fond smile playing on my lips. When my bill came, I paid for my coffee and for hers. On the back of my business card, I wrote a single word. Then, I walked over to her table, placed the card beside her laptop, and left without a sound. She looked down at the card. On it was the Nexus Audio logo, my name, my title, and the word I'd written: believe.